episode of Quilt with the Stars is brought to you by Baby Lock, for the love of sewing, Moda, make something with Moda fabrics, and Koala Cabinets, sewing furniture custom built in America. Hi, you're watching Quilt with the Stars. I'm Mary Fons, and my star today is the lovely and talented Sandy Gervais. You can clap. Clap at home. Clap at home. She can feel it. She can feel it.
You are crazy.
Well, I know. I try. We have a few things to show today, but I also want to talk to you a little bit and ask you about how you got started in the quilting industry and how you became the designer that you are today. So were you always an artist?
I always had an interest in art, and truthfully, that's always what I wanted to do, was do art.
Great, and you were encouraged, I'm sure, by all your teachers and your...
Not really.
You weren't?
No, my high school counselor, when I told him that's what I wanted to do, I actually wanted to design greeting cards. That's really what I wanted to do. And, you know, you have the little conference with the counselor.
Yes.
What
some sort of assessment is done, and you take a test that tells you need to be whatever.
When you're a senior, and I said that I wanted to design greeting cards. I thought it seemed possible.
I also had that dream. It seems like the best job ever.
And he didn't think that was a very good idea.
Really?
And he basically told me that an A in art does not make you an artist. An A in a high school art does not make you an artist.
What a great guidance counselor to really encourage those dreams. You know, I bet he was, well, I'm sure he was a nice man,
you know,
but that
he
is
was
not
there for
so,
a long, long time, and we have to remember back then that was really stepping out of the box.
It's true.
It really was.
True. You were like headed for a life of crime if you were going to be an artist.
Yeah,
it was like, oh,
right,
no.
because you know you were the starving artist,
right?
And you know you were a teacher, or you were a nurse, or you were a secretary, because we're going back a ways.
Right. Okay. So you weren't encouraged, but you did it anyway.
I did it anyway, but it took me a while.
Yeah.
Because then I got married and had children, and when our daughter Abby, the youngest, went to kindergarten, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do it.
I'm going to revisit that dream.
And I did.
And you made greeting cards.
I made greeting cards, and I sold them.
Take that, guidance counselor.
I sold them at. I got a rep that represented me, and he went out to all the gift shows, and they were sold at gift shows. And this was in, of course, the peak of cutesy country.
Sure, sure.
And the cards had cute little girls on them with little curly hair, and they were done with watercolor, which I chose that because I needed something quick. And of course, watercolor dries very quickly.
Absolutely, absolutely. What's interesting, and we'll see that as we look at some of your designs here and your patterns, is that I think your background as a graphic artist for the greeting card form, that mode of art really is reflected in what you do today, because you do a lot of panels, you do a lot of standalone images, exactly. And I think that's like completely makes sense when you know that about your background. So you were doing greeting cards, and then when did fabric come into things?
Well, I always sewed. My mother taught me how to sew when I was 8 years old. I started sewing. My first project was in 4-H, 8 years old, made a little gathered skirt. And of course, always sewed all my clothes in high school. And then about in the 70s, when all the garment fabric stores started closing, there was no place to buy fabric, so you quit making garment clothing.
Clothes became cheaper to buy, actually, than to make, oneself. So yeah, it really changed everything.
And so I was doing the greeting cards, and then my sister and I started a company where we were making finished goods. Well, before we did before I did greeting cards, my sister and I did finished goods.
Sure, sure. And by finished goods, you mean, that was a new term for me when we were talking about that.
We would make little dolls or little stuffed teddy bears, and we would sell them to stores.
Sure.
And she got tired of making all the repetitive. I got tired of making all the repetitive things, and she branched out into making patterns for the little dolls, and I branched out into my greeting card company.
Okay, because you got tired of doing the same thing over and over. Because you're an artist and you want to do the next thing.
Once I had done it, I didn't want to make 24 more of them.
Exactly.
So then that's when I started the greeting card business. And from the greeting card business, then quilting was starting to get popular, and I was craving sewing again, and so I kind of combined the two, because at that time then we were moving into cutesy country and starting to move into primitive country.
Right, and the shabby chic thing, right, all that.
And I just took there were a lot of little wall hangings, because people did groupings on their wall instead of one big thing like they're doing now. And I would take an image from my card and make it into a quilt with the heat transfer web method.
And that was your introduction into textiles.
Yes, so they just kind of overlapped. I went to a market, and Moda Fabric, my very first market, Moda Fabric came to see me. Cheryl Friedberg, from Director of Design for Moda, and Mr. Dunn, the owner of Moda, came by and were interested in my stuff. Totally took me by surprise.
Wow,
totally
your first time there?
Yes,
it was
I
meant
was
to
like,
be.
I was totally shocked. And you know, Cheryl was talking to me about the process and all that, and asked me to design for them. And when she left, my husband said to me, well, how do you design fabric? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, well, you better figure it out.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I guess I will.
And you did.
And I did. I figured it out.
Yeah, so I have a question about that, but go on. So you just started designing for Moda, and you have ever since.
I have,
correct?
and that was 17 years ago.
Wow. Wow.
And I'm kind of known as their season girl. I do the seasons: Christmas, Halloween, Valentine's, Americana, or summer. And then I have 2 non-season lines, and they always premiere at the spring market and the fall market.
Right, and that is where my question can come in, and you can tell me a little bit about this Snap Pop. This is, and yes, so tell me about this one.
This is the very latest line that I have just designed, and it will be premiering at fall market, and it will be in stores spring of 2013.
Great.
So we work quite a ways out.
Yeah, absolutely. And these, the question that I had was just about when you figured out how to design fabric, you're painting with what kind of paint?
Acrylic. I use acrylic.
Okay, and you're doing big panels. How big are the panels?
Well, the panels I actually paint to life size. So they're 24 by the width of the fabric, 44.
Sure, okay. And then
everything else I also paint to size. So these are all size. And if we need to, once we get into the design process, we might enlarge or shrink depending upon the prints that we pick.
Right.
And the color palette, of course, is done first and finalized first. And this is the first little group of strike-offs that I got. We finalize the color before we move into doing the prints. And these colors need to be tweaked just a little bit.
So fascinating to me. Yeah, you said they were a little too bright?
They're a little too bright. They need to be toned down just a little bit. And they will do that, and I'll get another strike-off to okay.
This is just lovely. You said this was the focus fabric or the
signature print is what they call it. Every line of fabric that I do for Moda has a panel and a signature print.
Oh, look at this. This is the panel, obviously.
This is the panel. Yes. This panel happens to have 2 images on it. And they will be side by side on the panel. And then there's little images in between that are just little 2-inch squares of like a single flower.
Great.
That they can cut apart.
Very good for fussy cutting, perhaps, some of these things.
Yes.
Yes.
But this was, you know, painted out in size. These are just shrunk down in printouts just for TV purposes. Sure,
absolutely. Well, it's very exciting, and this will be available in 2013.
And I pulled out all of the lavender prints, but it actually comes in all of these colors. So every one of these prints comes in every one of these colors.
Those are the colorways, right. Lovely. Okay, so there's you have a website where you sell your patterns and different books.
Patterns only. The fabric is only sold through Moda Fabric sales reps.
Right.
But my website is piecesfrommyheart.net, and all my patterns and books can be bought there.
When did you start the website? I mean, how long have you had that going?
Oh, probably. My pattern company started in '92. I would say maybe 5 years after that.
Wow, so you got right in there with the internet explosion. Quilters are good online. You know, I mean, we know. I feel like the sci-fi people and the quilter people, I don't know, we're smart. We knew the internet was going to be really important, and I think we got right in there, and it's such a huge community online, and it keeps growing, and entrepreneurial people like yourself, it just recognized right away it was such a great tool. And so this book is available there.
It's just one of my, I do single patterns and I do project books. This is my latest project book called Easy Peasy, and it's just little quick projects, like little pin cushions, little table favors, pins. A lot of it's made out of wool, recycled objects.
Yeah, selvages, and what are these little dots? I love this so much. What are they called, though, officially? Those are the color dots? Do they have a name?
Right. Well, you know, I don't know if they do, but they're on every selvage, and every one of these dots with the color in it represents the color that is in that fabric.
And it has something to do with the test. I mean, the computer needs to know that or something.
Well, and like number 6, I think, I'm not sure, but I think it's the 6th color to go down also. Because each one of these colors, I think, goes down at a different time.
Okay. Fascinating, but it's adorable used in that way. And this little book talks about different canvases that she used.
There's also a few decorating tips in here and different ways to think of things. like a canvas isn't always just a canvas. I used a checkerboard to paint my pumpkin on. And for this canvas, I used an old shoe last and a doorstop, some old jewelry, some trim off some blue jeans, and ribbon as my canvas.
Yeah, you're in the right business. I mean, you're doing the right thing, I think. You know, there's no doubt about that. We talked about the little wreath here. And
that's in the book. The little wreath is in the book.
This is in this book?
Yep.
Great, great. And then you've got patterns as well.
We do. They're just single individual patterns. For instance, this is the pattern of the quilt that we hung on the wall. And you can find these all on my website.
Great.
Just different patterns.
They're really, really nice. And you've designed the logo for them, and the little heart is your signature heart.
It is my signature heart. I hired a graphic artist to do the graphics for me because I am not a graphic artist.
Yep, yep. It's a different skill.
Different skill.
The last thing I want to ask you about is your studio. It's such a fascinating story. Where do you make all of your stuff?
I am very fortunate. I did start out in a one-room place, one tiny little room.
Yeah.
And then I moved to a two-room studio.
Yeah.
Two tiny little rooms.
Two tiny rooms.
And now I'm in the old Carnegie Library in town, which had been vacated. And
you're in Iowa.
In Algonquin, Iowa. And the city is always wanting to tear it down. The Historical Society
tearing down a library. You just can't.
They do. They want to tear it down. And so the Historical Society rents it from the city, and they sublease it to me.
Okay.
And I pay $1 a year for my rent.
$1 a year.
$1 a year, but I have to pay the heat.
Yeah, that could be bad in a drafty library.
It is, but it's still pretty cheap rent.
Yeah, yeah, and then property taxes or something. Taxes, yeah. But overall, to be
it's a great space. It's got lots of room.
Tell me about. There's 3 rooms.
There's 3 rooms, like the old libraries had. They had the reading room with the fireplace in it.
So that's where what do you do in that room?
That room is a room we don't use a lot. We thought we would hand stitch in there, but it's on the side of the building where there isn't as much light, so we just don't spend as much time in that room. And then there's a sewing room that has the most windows in it, and that's where the cutting tables are and the 3 sewing machines are, and that's where the girls sew. And then there's the old library counter where you used to check the books out.
Yes.
That's still there.
And that's used as your...
computer counter.
I thought you were going to say you cut on that table, but it's probably too high
for cutting. It's too high. I use it for my computer table.
It's amazing.
And I also and that's a very big room, and I have a huge table that I paint on. And a library, what does a library have?
Shelves.
Shelves.
Lots and lots of shelves.
Lots of shelves.
For fabric?
Yes.
For all your fabric?
Because Moda sends me 5 yards of every piece of fabric.
Whoa.
And each line has 40 pieces in it. 6 lines a year, times 40.
You'd need like an old library to store all of that fabric in.
So it's perfect.
That's awesome.
I wrap the fabric on the bolts, put them on the shelves.
Great.
So around each room are shelves full of fabric.
That's beautiful. It's just gorgeous. And actually, it's fitting that you wrote this little book, Living the Life of a Fabricaholic, because I think it's true.
It is.
Me too.
It's very true.
Me too. Thank you so much for coming on Quilt with the Stars. It's a pleasure to meet you and to see all of your work, and I'm always so impressed by the entrepreneurs in the quilt industry, the women who make it go, and you're one of them.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. See you next time. This episode of Quilt with the Stars is brought to you by Baby Lock, for the love of sewing, Moda, make something with Moda fabrics, and Koala Cabinets, sewing furniture custom built in America.